exactly.
Yeah, obviously Lies of P is borrowing heavily from Bloodborne, but there are things that it does uniquely, and I figure we could run down some of those.
Let's do it.
For starters, blocking. That's a huge one.
Blocking.
You basically can't block in Bloodborne. Not a thing.
Yeah.
You do it now. Also, visual cues for whatever visceral attacks, backstabs, whatever it is. It's a lot more like if you sneak up behind
more
somebody.
clear.
Yeah.
There's, I mean, in the
That I think they took from Sekiro. Sekiro
Definitely,
basically
definitely.
that exact same
totally.
system. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, in Bloodborne, if you get a bullet parry or whatever, it just makes this little bike horn squeak where it's like, and it's like that's when you're supposed to do it. In this case, there's just a full on like their health bar turns white or whatever. It's much more
the stagger you're talking about.
I mean, that's another thing is there's also, I feel like the way staggering works in Bloodborne is there's like an invisible meter. Like
exactly.
It's secret armor.
It's a lot more user friendly for sure. It's got a little bit of the same clunkiness that a Souls-like has, because I think that's a part of the genre at this point.
Yeah.
But on the whole, it's like, they've learned from games of the past, and I think they learned a lot from Sekiro. I think they learned a ton from Bloodborne, and then in certain areas they put on their own flair and do some cool stuff.
We touched on this, but like the most subtle change that I was talking to my buddy Timur, who was also like noting this, but like the fact that the color of the souls that you have changes from like white when you're running around and you're just collecting them, and the second you have enough to level up, it turns blue, and that is the most basic subtle difference, but it makes a huge difference in sort of how you approach it. Like if you're like, I'm doing a Souls run, I got to level up, I got to grind a little bit. It's handy. I
also think they explain their systems better. There is some sort of like
tutorial.
There's tradition in a Souls-like game to just not tell the player anything.
Yes.
And I like that they forsake that a little bit, because I am not a huge fan of that, and I think it's cool that they teach some of the systems.
I mean, I do love in Bloodborne they have like little slimy puppets on the ground that leave post-it notes for you, and you go up and they whoa, and you're like, okay, thanks this is not a tutorial, this is a scattered user manual. Yeah.
Travis, the fact that you finished this game and wrote a review for it, and I'm close to the end.
Yeah.
And
3 bosses away.
Yeah, and this is for a game that as of right now isn't out yet. I believe it's out on the 19th, right?
Correct.
That is not something I would have been able to pull off, I think, with like Dark Souls 2 or something like that, right? Which is just so overly obtuse and labyrinthian almost in so many ways, where you're just kind of like, I'm lost here. There's a lot that is crowdsourced when it comes to the FromSoft games. The community comes together really well.
I'm sure we're going to see some really cool like weapon crafting.
Yeah.
If you glue this thing to this thing, it'll kill this guy in 2 minutes.
No multiplayer is also a little bit.
That is a huge one.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about that.
It's interesting.
This guy does suck.
I hate.
So this guy's ability is so for those of you who are not watching the visual, it's a big old jester puppet, and it has the most annoying ability in the game, which is it applies a status effect called break. And break means that all of your healing items do basically nothing. Like they heal you like 10% of what they normally would.
I hate him already.
Yeah, and it's anytime you get somebody with a break effect, you're just like, oh yeah, I'm useless now unless I perfectly
slight tip for that is if there's other enemies in the area, kind of
let them do it.
Yeah, kite them towards him and let him bother them, and then
he's not the only one in the game, by the way.
Yeah,
you're gonna find more of Jester boys.
So another big difference when you do drop some souls or ergo or whatever you call it, and it's it's sitting there, a little glowing blue thing elsewhere on the map, and you got to go back.
I really like this change.
This is interesting, and I'm torn about it because it is an entirely new layer, but it makes it so that the damage you take on the way back to pick up your ergo, it detracts from it. So like if you're like, oh my god, I was just close to getting a level, I left like 16,000 souls or blood bucks or whatever sitting on the ground there, and you're running to get it, and dudes are just nailing you left and right, and you're just like, and it slowly goes down. You're like, oh, now I have 12,000, and like if you're going back to retrieve this thing, if it's left in some horribly inconvenient spot, and you're taking a bunch of damage on the way there, at some point you might just be like, it's a lost cause. We'll move on and do something else. And
the flip side of that is that depending on how much ergo you have, you could lose all of your health, fully die, and still have ergo left.
Oh, right.
And so it's not as damaging in certain cases, because if you've just got a ton of ergo, you're always going to reduce that ergo at the same rate, and so it hurts you more because you're going to take damage on the way there and lose some of it. And if you heal, you can double up on how much you lose, right? Because you're losing extra damage.
I don't think I caught that.
When you lose healed damage, basically anytime you get hit, if you fall off a cliff and you lose all of your health, it'll take 1 full health bar worth of ergo, however much that is
That's
worth.
like a extremely complex little change that absolutely changes the whole dynamic.
I also think that the checkpointing is fairly liberal in this game.
Yeah, I think so.
And there's only one or two classic FromSoft walk of shame back to the boss type areas in this game where it's
there's two that really bothered me.
Yeah.
They're pretty few and far between.
Yeah, there was one I was messaging you about yesterday. This guy, this big guy you fight, and like they just make you run up this whole thing, and everyone on the thing wants you dead on the way there. But for the most part, I actually I clocked it. I think only twice did I lose like enough souls that it pissed me off, or enough ergo that it pissed me off.
So I love how we all have to learn the verbiage for every Souls-like game.
The checkpoints are good. There's stargazers that you set up.
Stargazers, which are bonfires.
They're bonfires. The thing that really pissed me off about this is early on in the game, you can level up at those, and then you get to basically Krat Station, which is your sort of hub. And then suddenly you have to go back there to level up.
And then they change it again later in the game.
Okay.
It
seems completely arbitrary.
In like the last quarter of the game, you can level up at the Stargazers.
I think they made a decision to make you interact with certain characters because you get story beats out of that. And this is something I actually appreciate about the game, which is they prioritize story way more than other Souls-likes, which I think is cool. And I think they take away abilities from you. That way you have to check in with certain characters. And then when you get later in the story and you've advanced far along enough with your relationship with those characters, then they give you the ability back to do it whenever you're at a checkpoint. And so it is very odd because you're like, wait, I could do this thing and then I can't, and then I can do it again later. But I think it's honestly just they're doing it as a vehicle for like, how do we get Souls-like players to talk to people?
Yeah,
we have to. There's also lock some ability.
I always figured that the whole the doll's dream or whatever in Bloodborne was some. I feel like that has to do with the online component. Like it's something where it's just making sure everyone's on the same page. I don't know how that works, but it's again that whole thing where you have to travel back to the dream and level up.
Yeah,
kind of a pain in the ass.
It's like an instance.
Whatever instancing. Yeah, but like in this case, in this instance, you also can't pause, which there's no reason for that. It's not an online game. It's not a persistent thing where people can show up as ghosts.
Becoming more and more common in games, I've noticed, which is a very weird trait.
I think they were just like, let's do that
because it's Souls-like.
Let's be a pain in the ass about this.
Or maybe they're planning on adding multiplayer.
That's very possible.
We have found some weird things in the game that are unexplained, and I'm sort of been like, okay, is this a DLC thing, or is this maybe they're going to add multiplayer? There's no sign of that in the game right now, either co-op or PvP, but like this game feels like it's made for PvP, to be honest with you. I'm very surprised.
There's one thing we both found that says like, you can't access this right now, and we're like, well, what is it?
What is it? What does this do?
That's good to know. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it is super smart because this isn't an established franchise to put it out, get people's attention. You know, if you build it, they will come, then maybe patch in multiplayer later. If there's enough of a demand for it. But
here's another pet peeve. You can lock yourself out of side quests by making decisions on which loot you want.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. Yeah. Like there's a specific quest that myself and two of the guys working on the wiki all locked ourselves out of the mission because we just didn't know. They make you make a decision on like, hey, do you want this item or this item? And if you choose the wrong one, you can't complete a side quest that's super important to the game. Yeah. And it's like, wait, what?
You basically like crazy. This doesn't give anything away, but like when you kill certain bosses in this game, they drop like a big chunk of ergo and you can eat it and get your blood bucks or whatever, or you can trade it in for an item, and each one of those things works on two different types of items, and it's your decision to pick which one you want. And without really knowing, you can lock yourself out of a side quest from one of the other ones by picking a specific one.
That feels like pretty Bloodborne though. Yeah, you can't platinum the game unless you play it like 3 times or save scum pretty much.
There's also like I
don't think you can save scum in this one.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, I've tried. I tried myself because I tried to see both endings without replaying through it. And I was
right. Well, there's the lying mechanic, which is like characters will ask you questions, and it's like tick, 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 and you have to pick a left or right choice. And based on the sort of like calibration of those choices, you get one of 3 endings, effectively, right? And there was no real way of knowing. Like they're sort of like morally ambiguous to a point.
They are, yeah. Like one of them's like, hey, should you tell this person the truth about how their friend died, or should you lie and make up a story to make them feel better? And to me, I was like, she deserves the truth. And that the game presented it to me as I made the evil choice. Right. And I was like, really? I felt like she deserved to know the truth. Like
there's a lot of white lies, they call them, right?
There are white lies, and it's kind of unclear and morally ambiguous about whether you're supposed to lie, because one of the characters explicitly is like, yeah, you should lie. Like lying is a nice thing to do sometimes.
Right.
don't tell her that she's fat or whatever. It's like, you gotta. So they like tell you to do that. But then there's a separate mechanic where you can see how much lying you've done. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
The portrait.
Yeah.
So that's not really
the gameplay at all, or
no.
okay.
Yeah. So there's
Okay.
this isn't really a spoiler, but at some point in the game you get a way to tell how much lying you're doing, and it's a long nose based thing. Your character does not get a long nose. That's not in the game, but there's another mechanic that lets you do it, and you see you can either keep that nose really short or really long, and it's sort of just like a tracker. But so far as I can tell, it's kind of just for fun. Like it didn't really.
I kept waiting for the nose to burst through my donkey mask, but it doesn't actually change on your character.
Yeah.
But it is represented elsewhere.
I checked my nose every level. I swear I did. I was like waiting for it. I was like, when is this thing going to grow out?
So did Jiminy Cricket.
I was like, I guess, totally afraid it was going to be one of those, Souls-like things where you become like hollowed or whatever, and you lose half your health bar, and like red skeletons come up to kick your ass because you've been
No, I think it's
shoots you with lasers.
I think it's either 100% flavor or it has some invisible impact on the outcomes you can get. But I'll say this: I played the game with no real strategy in mind in terms of when I was going to lie and when I wasn't. I kind of just chose whatever I felt, and I was able to get the best version of the ending.
Oh, okay, cool.
And it worked out. Like you get to make a decision at the end, and
that rules.
So, yeah.
So other major things that have an effect on the game that are definitely not Bloodborne. You have items that can affect NPC summons. Like if you are having trouble with a boss, you can make a summon that the little ghost shows up, and it's if they do in fact add co-op or whatever, that's similar option with your actual friend will show up. But in this case, you have these cubes that you crush.
Yeah, it's like a wish
it's the wishing upon a star reference.
Yeah.
This one. So this is one of the areas that I think, one of the experiments I think doesn't really work out super well. Because the game has no multiplayer, they give you one NPC summon that you can summon at almost every major boss fight. It's not available in all of them, but almost all of them. And when you summon them, you get an item that you can expend, which you have to get fuel for that item using a currency that's time gated in real life, which is very bizarre.
Yeah,
you have to wait for a tree to grow currency, and then you pick the item from the tree and then you spend it.
I love video games.
It's
stupid.
It's very odd, and so that incentivizes you if you're like me. Oh, I need to go to sleep. Well, I guess I'll leave the game on so that the tree will grow.
Right,
and I'll get enough of the material.
You can also buy like booster shots for it and inject it so it grows faster or more. Or
Are you kidding? I don't know.
No, that's a real thing.
I'm serious. You can fertilize the tree, and then it makes you get the tree. So it's very weirdly set up, and not in a way where I was like, okay, so this will clearly make sense at some point in the game, and it never did. Like it's one of those things where you're just like, they could have just made me spend money on this.
I will say I always had more coins than I ever really needed for it. So it's not really an issue.
It might be if you're dying a ton and you're summoning this guy every single time. You die 30 times, and I think you.
And as the kids say, get good, my man. Like,
you're gonna have to
on with your life?
Get good or wait.
Wait for the.
But it feels like a very weird. It's like, I can't beat a boss, and I'm out of these coins.
Yep.
Oh, I guess I just have to wait for 80 minutes to get enough coins to try again.
Yeah,
that seems really.
And so the wish cubes basically apply like a status boost to your Spectre, who's your NPC.
Yes.
And the one I use a lot was like you give them just like a burst of extra health. So when you see like they're getting wailed on by a boss, and you're using that boss to, or that NPC to distract the boss so you can kick the boss's ass from behind. When they start getting like real soft, you hit the button and all of a sudden they get a little more energy, and it keeps you in the game a little longer. There's also ones that you can use on yourself. Like it'll increase your stamina. So they don't
that's normal. That makes sense. But I feel like
those aren't very good though.
Yeah.
Okay. It's called a wish, and it's one of the hardest currencies to get. You have to do the coin thing and exchange them for the wish thing, and then once you use a wish, it's a one-time consumable.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, I wish this was better. Like, you know what I mean? Because like one of them is like it heals you, and so far as I could tell, it wasn't really doing that. Like it might have been a small chip, or maybe you have to attack to get it, but I couldn't really get it.
Devil's advocate. But because I play so scrappy, there were a couple of times where I was literally on like my last bit of health, and I'm reaching into my pockets and I'm throwing all the shit I can. Every piece of trash in my pocket, I'm pulling it, because you have like 14 inventory slots of different consumables and throwables and stuff like that. So at one point, like at the very end of a fight, I was just tossing everything, and I pulled out that wish thing, gave my guy a little more health, pulled out a couple of like oil barrels and fireballs, and I was just throwing them, and the boss dropped down, and I just jumped up screaming and cheering. I had one of those like classic FromSoft moments.
The swamp boss you're stuck on?
Yes.
Nice.
I was stuck on him for like an entire afternoon.
Yeah, I hate bosses like that. It's weird because the two people on the wiki, I've asked them, hey, what was the boss you got stuck on? And we all had different answers. Like, I said King of Puppets. That was the only boss that like stuck me up for a significant amount of time. Well, and somebody else was like final boss, and you said swamp, and the swamp I beat like my first try.
That's crazy.
It's super weird. The people have like issues on completely different bosses.
It makes sense with the different builds and all that.
Yeah.
Styles, but
it reminded me of
I do a lot better on big, slow bosses.
Yeah.
As a technique build, and I think you're a little slower.
With Bloodborne, I remember like I beat Father Gascoigne on the first try and was just like, oh man, that was cool. Yeah. And then every single time I played him after that, it was like an hour where he's just he's beating my ass through the tombstones and everything. Right. And like I would talk to other friends who were like, oh, I was stuck on him for like 2 weeks or whatever, and like, yeah.
I remember I was stuck on a boss in a Souls-like this week, and then I saw somebody else online beat a boss in Elden Ring, or their goldfish beat it. Did you see that video?
No.
Somebody's goldfish beat a boss in Elden Ring.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So he superimposed a keyboard over the fishbowl, and the fish swims around and randomly hits buttons, and then that input goes into the game.
Shut up.
He had a goldfish beat one of the boss in Elden Ring.
There's a goldfish.
So if you ever feel bad at a video game,
isn't there a goldfish in Pinocchio?
Back it up.
The original? There is.
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
What's his name? Figaro? No, it's a cat. There's a goldfish.
Goldfish didn't make his way to the game.
No, he didn't make it here. He's got too busy beating
got cut. Yeah.
So I want to get over these other things that it does differently from Bloodborne. There's a skill tree, an actual skill tree, which is like it's weird to think like, oh, that actually isn't a thing that we have. Like it's kind of, I almost was sort of thrown for a loop when you unlock that.
That's right.
It's in some Souls-likes. There's been one or two that have added skill trees, but I would say it's still pretty fringe. And I would say of the skill trees we've seen, I think this is my favorite one.
Elden Ring didn't have it, right? It had other
Elden
trees.
Ring didn't have it. It was like
several trees in that game.
Several trees. It also had gold trees.
It had gold trees. It had Erd trees. It had every type of tree
that you can climb. There's plenty of ladders in this. This is like such a weird, like granular nitpick. Enemies don't follow you up ladders, and you can't do any kicking or punching or healing while you're on the ladders.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I have a lot of very fond memories of Bloodborne where like a werewolf is like following me up a ladder, and I'm just like kicking him in the face, and I'm like, now get down. And like,
not only can they not follow you up ladders, but if there's a big boss that has the ability to jump in the air like crazy, if you lure them down to a lower platform and then climb up the ladder, they won't be able to jump back up.
No.
They can't follow you.
Interesting.
They will. So it's way too easy to manipulate. That's one of my main criticisms of this game is I feel like the sections that aren't bosses are like laughably easy most of the time. Like you can manipulate the AI pretty easily. You're just kind of like
at games. I'm having a good time.
Oh really? Yeah. you can just blow through a lot of the stuff. Like dying in the non-boss fight areas for me was pretty rare.
It's pretty rare. Yeah.
Souls likes.
There's definitely a couple of.
And then when you get into a boss, it's so much harder. You're like, I don't feel like that level prepared me for this at all.
There's a leap. There's a leap.
One thing I noticed, and this is such a, I feel like we talk about this game not surprising us enough. The enemies will follow you really far.
Yeah.
Oh, they will.
Which is extremely funny because I think there's that that logic of like, Bloodborne or whatever. You just run away.
They're tethered.
Just run away. Yeah. They'll eventually come to the flight of stairs and be like, I'm not going up there. And then like larger enemies will follow you.
They follow you to the checkpoint.
They'll follow you to the checkpoint, which you then can't use because they'll be like, "There's a big guy behind you. You can't use this right now." And it's like, it adds an extra wrinkle.
Yeah.
But no, the ladder thing is funny because I have very fond memories of standing at the top of a ladder in Resident Evil 4 with my knife out, just knifing grandpas. And they're all falling down and they're like dissolving or whatever they do in that game, turning into grandpa puddles.
Gems.
And so I wanted a little bit of that in this game, but I'm like, it's one of those things you learn the language very quickly, and you're like, all right. So if I go up a ladder, no one's going to follow me. Cool. There'll be more psychos up there to kill me, but like that guy down there is just going to be like, oh, well, and walk away because he never learned it,
Yeah.
I love that. Travis, this is one thing you really like. You can collect records because there are items and
so
music is really good.
The music is so good in this game.
It's awesome.
To the point where when you're working on a review, you usually have to turn the in-game music off to record footage because when they put the video together, if there's music on it, it interferes with the music that the video play throughout the review. And so you have to turn it off. But this game, I was just like, I'm going to record all my footage later.
Yeah.
The music is quite good. It does have long sections with no music, which I actually kind of liked aesthetically because it kind of just focuses you in. And then when the music comes up, you're like, oh, dang.
Yeah.
But you collect records. I still have not found a ton of the records, which is weird.
It is
because
weird.
I've done so much of the game, and I'm on my second playthrough, and I'm still missing a bunch. I'm like, why am I missing so many records?
I think I only have like 5 or 6 out of like 30, and I'm like 99% weighted through.
Yeah, that's where you you do find a couple at the end, but like I'm spending a lot of my time trying to get those records because they're worth it. I definitely want to buy this OST. And they give you in-game benefits to listening to the music too. Because there's a whole like, is your character going to be more robotic or is he going to be a real boy? There's like that decision tree.
Oh, right.
And listening to music is one of the things that makes you more human. And so when you're deciding if you want to be a real boy or not, if you want to be a real boy, listen to the records.
All right.
Do a good job.
And finally, one thing, you call this out. This might be the first Souls-like with a legitimately good story.
Yes.
Excluding the Star Wars ones, which is...
the Star Wars ones are
they
better.
Have a lot to build on, though.
Yeah, they have a lot to build on, and it's very clearly like they borrow a lot from the universe and stuff. This has a lot working against it. It's based off of a Pinocchio book that is very bizarre. Just my reading of that book was I was just like, dude, I don't get this book at all. This is super, super weird. Pinocchio gets revived from a block of wood, and then he goes on to just be the worst human being for like 15 years. I think it's supposed to be a message about fatherhood, like, oh, you still love them even though they're super bad people.
Right.
But you teach them empathy eventually.
Yes.
I think that's supposed to be the message, but just you're reading a book about Pinocchio just being super disrespectful his entire life, which is a bizarre story.
Which, to be clear, Bloodborne, Elden Ring, and stuff like that, they have lore.
They have lore,
right? Which is it's different than story. Like there's a lot of overlap there, but lore is a lot of like, this is kind of in the back pocket and stuff like that, and you're digging around for it, and it's very rewarding once you find it and you look into it.
If you have to watch a YouTube video to understand it, it's not a story. That's the way I think. That's lore.
I like that.
Yeah. So and this one you don't need the YouTube video. Like they do enough exposition, and they smartly do some of it during boss fights. They know that you're going to lose a lot.
Yeah.
So that you have to hear it again, and then eventually you go, oh yeah, I do remember that because it wasn't one line of dialogue. It was said to me 5 times because I died 5 times on that boss. That I think that's really smart. And then by the end of the game, you're like, okay, that story made sense. I understand every part of it. I didn't have to look anything up. I didn't have to read any item descriptions. And the story they told, pretty good.
That's
honestly pretty good. I was surprised.
Really cool.
So
I think there's kind of a good track record for games based on books. Yeah,
you're kind of right.
If they take a lot. I mean, The Witcher, for instance, there's I think large amount of stuff to work from, and I don't know, movies are too linear. I don't know.
Anyway. They definitely went their own way and told their own version of Pinocchio because it has very little in common. But I love the nods to the original book, and it very much is the original Pinocchio book. So if you just watch the Disney film, you're probably going to be like, I don't get a lot of this. But also, there's a big whale in Pinocchio. That's not a spoiler.
Right.
Do you know? I was thinking about this. I was like, where was the whale?
It's a submarine.
It's a submarine.
That was spoiled for me in a trailer. We totally asked them like at an interview. I was like, oh, so like there's a whale. Is it going to be a big whale boss fight?
There's no whale boss fight. There's no whale boss fight. And in fact, though, there's not even really a whale enemy. There's like one part where you get on a submarine and you don't even like hang out on the submarine. It's like a cutscene that takes you from one place to another. So I was pretty disappointed in that element. But the nods to the original story, the story that they decided to tell, which is very different from Pinocchio, I think was good. And some of the characters, like I like Vanini a lot.
Yeah.
He makes me want to do a super offensive Italian accent all the time. But he's very.
If you need pointers, I'm here. My whole family talks like that.
Is that real?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.